Andy is a 30-year-old who works as a 911 dispatcher for the police department.
911, what is your emergency?
She's unambitious and lives with her mother, Laura, a speech therapist for veterans. Her boring and uneventful life comes to an end when her mother invites her to lunch to celebrate her 30th birthday.
Still up for lunch?
Sure.
Andy shows up at the restaurant in her uniform. While eating, her mother urges her to pursue a college degree.
What I'm trying to say is you need a plan, you know? If you want to go back to school, don't wait another year. We've already missed the fall deadline.
But Andy insists on staying in town and living her routine life. As they argue, Laura's friend interrupts, boasting about her pre-med daughter. Uncomfortable with the conversation, Andy excuses herself to the bathroom. As she passes a man in the restaurant, he suddenly pulls out a gun and fires at Laura's friends. Chaos erupts as everyone dives for cover, and Laura rushes to shield Andy from the gunfire. Spotting Andy's police uniform, the shooter mistakes her for an officer, aims his gun at her, and orders her to stand.
Get up, pig! Get up!
Seeing this, Laura begs the shooter to spare Andy. She explains that Andy only works as a call operator for the police, but this makes the man enraged. As he points the gun to shoot, Laura pushes the gun away, causing him to misfire. Realizing the threat, the man swiftly draws a dagger to stab Laura, but she blocks it with her hands, causing a pierce through. Without hesitation, Laura immediately swipes the dagger and slits his throat, causing him to drop lifeless on the floor. In the hospital, as Laura awaits hand surgery, she sees the news report with her face on the front page. A nurse sees this and comments on her overnight fame.
Hey, you're famous.
But Laura doesn't seem happy about this. Meanwhile, Andy waits in the lobby with her stepfather Gordon when Detective Wilson approaches them for questioning. The detective plays a video of Laura slitting the shooter's throat and attempts to probe for more information about Laura, but Andy refuses to comply. At this moment, Laura comes out of the surgery theater and immediately dismisses the detective. While outside the hospital, Laura suddenly tells her daughter to move out of the house.
You need to move out.
Andy is shocked at the sudden request and tries to change her mother's mind, but Laura insists that she act like an adult and move out.
You're an adult, so start acting like one.
That night, as the news reports on the case, a mysterious man calls someone to warn of a problem.
We've got a problem.
Meanwhile, Andy is disoriented by everything and tries to stabilize her mind. At the same time, Laura receives comfort from Gordon. That night, Andy is awakened by the thunder rumbling, so she prepares her bags to leave the house. But as she walks to the garage for her bike, she notices a strange man lurking around and immediately hides. However, she hears the man breaking into the house, so she sneaks in to check on her mother. Upon entering the house, she sees her mother tied up with the stranger, trying to choke her to death, so she immediately texts the police before hitting the man with a lampstand from behind. He quickly recovers and tries to overpower her. During this struggle, Andy manages to push him aside, so he hits his head on a hammer and dies. Seeing that the man is dead, Andy tells her mother that the police are on their way.
The police. Oh, God.
But Laura is shocked to hear this. Instead of feeling relieved, she immediately instructs Andy to search through the strange man's pocket for his phone. As soon as they find his phone, Laura gives Andy a new phone, key, and some cash. Then she instructs Andy to drive to Carrollton, where she'll find a storage unit with a car key.
When you get to Carrollton, there's a storage place called Get 'em Go. You can look for unit 320, okay?
With the car, she'll drive all the way to Maine. Then Laura warns Andy to wait in Maine for her phone call. Although Andy is confused, she obeys her mother's instructions and leaves the house. As she drives away in the strange man's car, the police arrive at her home. After driving for hours, Andy finally arrives in Carrollton and begins asking around for the storage unit her mother directed her to. She stops at a cafe to look up its location. Suddenly, she remembers the strange man mentioning someone named Paula Kuntz while tying up her mother, so she searches for this name, but nothing relevant shows up. Meanwhile, Detective Wilson questions Laura about the sudden call last night, so Laura lies about suffering from PTSD, hence the call.
I'm pretty keyed up, and I woke up in the middle of the night, thought I saw someone outside. Obviously, by the time the police got here, no one was there.
After recounting the incident with the shooter, the detective leaves. Soon after, Laura calls Gordon and tells him to return home immediately. Hearing the panic in her voice, Gordon rushes home. Meanwhile, at the cafe, Andy notices a strange man lurking around her car, so she escapes through the back door and luckily stumbles on the storage unit. With the key card, she unlocks the storage and finds a car. Inside the car, she finds a fully loaded gun, some provisions in the boot, and a money suitcase. She also finds several identification cards and a photo of the younger version of her mother. Although confused, she decides to continue the journey to Maine in the new car. Gordon arrives home and asks about Andy, so Laura informs him that Andy has left for Maine.
Where's Andy?
She's on her way to Maine.
She tells him about the encounter with the strange man and shows him the man tied up in her wardrobe. It turns out he didn't die from the hit. Confused, Gordon tries to call the cops, but Laura stops him and reveals that the strange man will be meeting with someone at 3 o'clock.
No, we don't have time.
What do you mean we don't have time?
He said he's supposed to meet someone outside Macon at 3 o'clock to get paid.
So they have to get to the location to find the real person behind everything. Gordon refuses to partake in her plan, but she convinces him that Andy's life is in danger, so he agrees to drive her with the tied man in the back seat. On the way, the man experiences a seizure.
What's happening?
He's having a seizure.
Jesus.
And as Laura tries to help him, he tells her that the main boss will find and kill her.
He's gonna kill you.
Soon after, he dies. Seeing the situation, Gordon presses Laura about her past, so she reveals that a mysterious man is after her life. Upon hearing this, Gordon promises to help her. Meanwhile, Andy checks into a motel but grows restless alone, so she visits a bar across the street. There, she meets a man and they get talking. He introduces himself as Jack.
Jack.
You from around here?
And reveals that he's a former soldier. Hearing this, Andy begs him for shooting lessons,
Are you expecting more trouble or something?
so they practice all night. After the practice, Andy escorts him to his car. As he opens his door, she spots an item in his car and suddenly recalls seeing it in a car near her house. She instantly panics and rushes back to her motel room. The following day, Andy quickly packs up her bags, leaving her new car at the motel. Then she visits a car dealership to purchase a new car with the money in her suitcase. Meanwhile, as Laura talks about her experience on television, she comments on the need for an army for change.
Be our own army for change.
Upon hearing this phrase, a mysterious man grows tense. On the other hand, Andy finalizes the deal for a car, and as the seller leaves to prepare the paperwork, she immediately uses his telephone to call Charlie, her mother's friend.
Charlie? It's Andy.
At the same time, Laura returns home after the interview and finds a man standing outside her house. He offers to help her leave the country in order to avoid the main boss, but she turns down the offer.
And if you come anywhere near me again, I will go to the cops and I will tell them exactly what I know.
Before leaving, he reveals that the organization will go after her daughter. Meanwhile, Andy abandons the plan to head to Maine and goes to visit Charlie. As they sit for a discussion, she reveals everything that has happened and shows him the portrait of her mother she found in the suitcase. When she asks him about Paula Kuntz, he denies knowing anything and tells her to take a rest since she came all the way from Carrollton.
Do you know Paula Kuntz?
Who?
But Andy becomes suspicious since she never mentioned coming from Carrollton. This suspicion drives her to search his drawer, where she finds a portrait of his wife and children. Realizing he lied about being single, she becomes suspicious of him and leaves. Then, she contacts Gordon and inquires about Charlie's real identity, but he's reluctant to reveal any information on the phone, so she becomes angry and hangs up the call, promising to get to the root of everything.
I guess I'll have to figure him out myself.
Gordon immediately informs Laura about this development and offers to help, but Laura rejects his help and sends him away. Meanwhile, Andy visits a children's park and borrows a MacBook to look up Paula Kuntz. After modifying her search, she discovers that Paula is currently a fugitive, known for being a member of a terrorist group in the 1980s. As she jots down some notes about Paula's lawyer, Laura suddenly calls and convinces her to return home.
Let me come get you, and I can explain.
So she agrees. As Laura drives to pick up Andy, she's suddenly surrounded by 2 cars. On the other hand, Andy takes a detour to a law firm and inquires about Geraldine Ross, Paula's lawyer. But when the receptionist turns down her request, she slips into the firm's restroom and steals a worker's office pass. Unknown to her, Jack has been stalking her and manages to break into her car to find the money suitcase. Once he sees her returning from the law firm, he abandons the suitcase and focuses on stalking her. Unaware of this, Andy drives to a hostel and puts on some camouflage makeup to impersonate the worker from the law firm. Thanks to her flawless disguise, she bypasses security and is allowed to meet Paula in prison. However, Paula immediately sees through the acts and questions her reason for visiting, so Andy tries to probe for information about Laura's past.
Do you know this woman?
Seeing that Laura's name doesn't ring a bell to Paula, Andy shows her pictures, which works. The photos rile up Paula, and she becomes aggressive. So, as the prison warden drags her out, she yells that Laura's real name is Jane Queller, and that Jane is supposed to be dead.
That freaking bitch! She's fucking dead!
Upon hearing this, Andy researches the surname Queller and discovers a man named Jasper Queller, an author and owner of one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country. She decides to read his books and finds several mentions of Jane's name. It turns out that Jane is his sister. Shocked, Andy steps outside to process this. Then she notices Jack tailing her. She tries to evade him, but he chases after her in his car. So she lures him to an alley and points a gun at him.
Why are you following me?
Seeing this, he confesses to being a cop
I'm a cop.
Bullshit.
and shows his badge as proof. It turns out he's a U.S. Marshal whose real name is Michael. He also reveals that Andy and her mother are under witness protection.
Because you and your mother are in witness protection.
As they sit together for a discussion, he reveals that her life is in danger. But Andy ignores his warning and asks him to help her sneak into a fundraiser event organized by Jasper Queller.
Jasper Queller's holding a private fundraiser in El Paso tomorrow. I need you to get me in.
So he agrees. Meanwhile, Charlie confines Laura and tells her she must move somewhere no one knows her.
Start all over again? No, I won't do it.
Frustrated with the endless hiding, she lashes out, blaming them for failing to catch Nick, the mastermind. Upon hearing this, Charlie shows her tons of pictures and asks for her help in identifying the people in the picture, but she denies knowing any of them. Instead, she insists on signing out of the witness protection program in order to regain her past identity as Jane. In the meantime, Andy and Michael stay at a motel overnight to prepare for the fundraiser. However, in the middle of the night, Michael leaves the room to update someone about his situation with Andy.
What do you want me to do with her?
Unknown to him, a mysterious man sneaks into the motel and tries to strangle Andy, but Michael arrives in time to fight off the man. Using this opportunity, Andy escapes from the motel. As soon as she gets onto the street, a black car begins to stalk her, so she speeds off and tries to climb over an iron fence, but Michael stops her in time. Feeling relieved, she suddenly kisses him and ends up crying in his embrace.
Oh, God.
The next day, at the Jasper Queller fundraiser, Andy approaches Jasper Queller under the pretense of being a fan of his book. As he signs her book, she reveals her identity as his niece.
And who should I make it out to?
Jane Queller?
So he instructs his secretary to take Andy to a private room. The security prevents Michael from going in, so he decides to wait around at the door. In the private room, as Jasper and Andy share a cute moment as a family, Michael notices a suspicious man and goes after him. However, he loses the man and decides to return to the private room. But he finds the room empty, with Andy's phone on the couch. Meanwhile, Andy trusts Jasper Queller and leaves with him in a car. At the same time, Laura signs the document to end her witness protection, so Charlie returns her old identity card with the name Jane. Andy begins to live with Jasper, while Michael reports her missing to the feds. However, they tell him that Andy and her mother are no longer in witness protection, so he's no longer required to protect Andy. As Michael prepares to end his case with Andy, he suddenly receives a call from Laura and informs her that Andy has reunited with her uncle, Jasper Queller. She's shocked to hear this and ends the call. Seeing that Andy may be in danger, Michael changes his mind and sets out to help her. Meanwhile, at Jasper's mansion, Andy inquires about her mother's past, so Jasper reveals that her mother was close friends with a man named Nick Harper, who founded a terrorist group with Paula. However, Nick betrays Laura by orchestrating the murders of her father and brother.
Wait, Nick Harp killed your father?
No, he handed a gun to a woman who did.
To protect herself, she was forced to assume a new identity. The scene then shifts to a flashback with the Queller family, all seated for dinner. Nick Harper is present at the dinner as a family friend. During the happy dinner, he begins to exchange glances with Jane, hinting at a romantic relationship between the two. Later on, Nick introduces Laura to Paula, and together they form a terrorist group named Army of the Changing World in order to carry out missions like bombing nuclear research facilities. As Laura and Nick's relationship gets serious, Laura's father meets up with Nick and exposes him for falsifying his identity. It turns out that Nick Harper is the name of a dead man.
Nick Harper's dead. He died 4 years ago of an overdose.
As soon as this is exposed, Nick and Laura experience a fallout in their relationship. Back in the present at Jasper's house, Andy reviews some old tapes of her mother playing the piano. Out of nowhere, a housekeeper arrives and hands her a tape. She plays it and discovers that her mother and Nick are romantically involved. Upon discovering this, she quickly calls Michael to share her findings, and they arrange to meet the next day.
Tomorrow, all right?
Okay.
Later, Andy confronts Jasper about Nick's identity, but he denies knowing anything. So Andy decides to meet the housekeeper for more information. However, this leads her to discover that the house security has been eavesdropping on her conversations with Michael. As soon as she learns this, she immediately escapes from the house. Unknown to her, the house security has a tracker on her. The next day, she meets Michael in a public space and tells him about the possibility of her father being Nick Harper.
I think he's my father. I saw this video. He and my mom were together.
Michael also reveals that Jasper Queller has an ulterior motive and isn't who they think he is. As they discuss this, a woman bumps into Michael but immediately apologizes and leaves. A few minutes later, Michael suddenly falls and loses consciousness. Once the ambulance arrives to treat him, Andy slips away. Meanwhile, Laura visits her brother's company in an attempt to meet her daughter, but Jasper Queller informs her that Andy has escaped from his house.
Andrea left early this morning. I was a bit surprised.
Upon hearing this, Laura becomes worried and contacts Charlie for help in finding Andy. At the same time, Andy heads to Michael's hotel room to retrieve her suitcase of money. After finding the suitcase, she pauses to review a document but hears a suspicious noise and quickly hides in the bathroom. The intruders invade the room and leave, taking the money suitcase with them. Seeing this, Andy begins to tail them closely with her car. When they stop at a food mart, she slashes one of their tires, causing their car to break down in the middle of the road. So, as they focus on changing the tires, Andy slips into their car's booth without their notice. In a flashback, Nick and his group of terrorists, which also includes Laura, hold an influential woman hostage. However, the cops locate their hideout and a fight breaks out. The hostage tries to escape by stabbing into Nick's hand, but he quickly flips his hands to slit her throat, mirroring how Laura learned to kill the shooter at the beginning of the series. Then, he pulls out the knife from his hands and escapes with his team. As they arrive at a safe house, they discover that Andrew, one of the team members, was hit by police bullets. Laura pleads for hospital care, but Nick coldly refuses. So they administer home treatment to his gun wounds at the safe house. But Laura knew he wouldn't survive, so she tried to steal money from Nick to transport him to the hospital. However, she's caught and beaten up by Nick. But she doesn't give up. Instead, she teams up with some of the group members to sneak Andrew to the hospital, but he ends up dying. So her brother Jasper persuades her to deny any involvement with the terrorist group and to put all the blame on Nick, but she rejects this plan and accepts full blame, leading to her arrest. Back in the present, the mysterious people transporting Andy stop to meet a shadow man, so Andy slips out of the booth with the money suitcase. However, the shadow man suddenly shoots them and goes to search the booth for the suitcase, so Andy immediately hides under the car. Once he finds nothing, he calls and informs someone that the suitcase is nowhere to be found.
It's gone.
Gone where?
I don't know.
After he leaves, Andy comes out and leaves unharmed. However, she suddenly receives a call from her mother, and they reunite after the sudden separation. As they catch up with each other, Laura confesses about her past and confirms that Nick is Andy's father.
Is he my father?
Yes.
Once the truth is out, Andy persuades her mother to stop hiding from Nick, so they both decide to seek protection from the FBI. But as Andy goes to pay for their dinner, Laura immediately escapes with the money suitcase. The next day, Andy meets Charlie, who figures out that Laura must have gone to an old house in the north, so they drive to find her. But on the road, a car suddenly rams into them, prompting their car to fall off a cliff. Andy wakes in an eerily familiar room. It turns out that she had lived there as a child, while her mother was serving jail time for taking the blame for Nick. As a child, she met Nick while playing in the woods. He gave her a coin and promised to find her in the future.
As long as you have this, that means I'll come back.
Later, her mother is released from prison and she is taken out of the woods to live with a new identity. As they leave, Andy reveals the coin, which Laura immediately recognizes as Nick's property. As Andy recalls this childhood memory, she looks around the house and finds Nick in one of the rooms. It turns out that while she was recovering from the car accident, Nick took a video of her unconscious and sent it to Laura. Upon watching the video, Laura becomes agitated and immediately drives to meet them with the money suitcase. Inside the house, Nick dumps out the suitcase's contents, uncovering a tape which can help him blackmail Jasper and set himself free from the police.
It's too dangerous. Just get Alex Maplecroft invited to Oslo. I'll do the rest.
As he puts his guard down, Andy suddenly knocks off a fire lamp on the table, igniting the house in flames. In the middle of the chaos, Laura tries to sneak up on Nick, but he pushes her aside, causing his gun to fall out. So Laura picks it up and escapes from the burning house with Andy. Then she goes after Nick and trains her gun on him, blocking his escape. The police arrive at this moment and surround the place. Nick ends up going to jail, and Andy reunites with Michael to build their relationship.